The real world is not you competing for a set list to be number two, to be number one. The real world, you can go make your own game. Here's my story, okay? I want to get a little serious for a sec. Back in school, I was very socially anxious. Now you're thinking, why the fuck are you telling me this? Hear me out, okay? Back in school, I was very socially anxious in the sense that, like, I was just trying to find my place in the world, right? And of course, all of us were born into a certain kind of environment, and that environment shapes our thinking. The kind of mindsets your parents will have, your neighbors, your relatives, your closest circle, whether we like it or not, our environment shapes who we are. And this is a very tricky thing, and I'm going to talk about why it's a tricky thing. It's because as a kid, I felt really, really anxious socially to talk to people, but also about life. And the reason throughout my years in school, I always felt that there was a race that I was a part of. I always, like, either it was the environment or it was my parents directly telling me go for IIT coaching, right? It always felt like I was a part of a race. And that really threw off my balance. The reason I felt that was all throughout school, we compete, right? And only after I started speaking to people outside of India, people who didn't really grow up in that same kind of education environment, did I realize, dude, this is not for everybody. It's just an Indian problem. The fact is, we've been taught all our lives to compete. Even if not directly, it's a very inbuilt thing within our society, or not for everybody. I won't generalize. But in a class, for example, you're in 8th grade, bro. What do you know in 8th grade? I knew nothing when I was in 8th grade. But you do feel this competition that there is somebody above you, there is somebody below you, right? For you to get higher marks and be number in your class, somebody else has to be lower, right? And that carries on into things like IIT coaching. In coaching, we're like, dude, for me to get a rank, I need to beat someone else. There's a fixed number of seats available. There's a fixed number of opportunities. And the bad news is that most people don't realize that's not really how the world works. We continue living our lives. After this, we get into it, we start working, and it pretty much stays the same. So the reason I talk about this, you might have heard of this kind of mindset is called a zero-sum mindset, which is people are like, dude, there's a fixed number of spots in the world that we're all competing for. So obviously you're gonna be not friendly to the next person, right? That's a zero-sum mindset. The problem is that most people don't grow out of that zero-sum mindset. Even today, for example, I'll talk about when that changed for me. When that changed for me, in some of the early videos on this channel, I talked about, dude, I loved The Social Network. I was like, yo, Social Network. The reason The Social Network, Zuckerberg, the movie, the reason it was a big deal for me was that was the first time, literally imagine that in 10th standard, that was the first time when I realized that things are not zero sum. I realized, I am somebody who's in school/college. To see, of course, Mark Zuckerberg, I didn't know anything about who Mark Zuckerberg was, but to see Mark Zuckerberg not really have to play the game that he was a part of, but to create something new. The key word here is create. I didn't realize it back then. It's only today that I can put these words to it. Back then I was just generally blown away, generally crazy that I want to build something like this. But I realized, dude, the world is not zero sum, which is today, it's a bit of a toxic environment because of zero sum mentality in some ways, not generalizing. But a lot of people assume there's a fixed number of jobs out there. And the reason I'm talking about this is we assume that all of us, all the people who want to become designers, a lot of people without even thinking about it, assume that we are competing that we're competing for a fixed number of jobs that are out there. And that leads to some intense toxicity, guys. Like, it's real. And that's a zero-sum mindset. But the reality is, I want all of you to realize that one of the reasons we call this cohort-based learning or community-based learning, it's not really a buzzword. We're not just saying this is a batch. This is not a batch like a coaching batch, right? Why? Because number one, a coaching batch doesn't allow you to explore yourself. It's not about self-exploration. Coaching is not about self-exploration. It's about being told what to do. And we will never tell you what to do. We will help guide you. And number two is a coaching batch. You compete with everybody. You're competing. You might help each other, but at some level, you know you're competing because the game there is a zero-sum game. Getting into IIT is a zero-sum game. You're not going to be competing with the people in the chat. So this is really important to me. I want you all to understand, you are not competing with the people in the chat. The point is there is not a fixed number of jobs out there. Every single day that is expanding, right? So the minute you start getting defensive, it doesn't make sense, right? The number of jobs out there is not limited. For you to be successful, somebody else doesn't have to be unsuccessful. We can all be successful. We can all be successful. So the idea of 10K designers, a lot of people feel like, dude, so fucking elitist. You're like saying people can't get into this program and shit, but that's not the case at all. That's the opposite of what we stand for. The reason it's 10K designers is because it's a hard goal to reach. It's a very hard goal to reach. And we're not going to get there if we're pulling each other down. We're going to get there if we're pushing each other up, if we're supporting each other. Because think about this. If you're still thinking zero sum, it can take a while when you think about this. But the number of jobs is not limited. You might think, okay, what's the proof for that? The number of startups in the past year alone has gone like this, right? What's happening is design is one of those things that people have realized is table stakes. What that means is basically people back in the day, right? Let's say even 2010, people used to think design is this extra thing that you do, right? एक बार सब कुछ हो गया तो अच्छा दिखना चाहिए, उसके लिए हम डिजाइन करेंगे. That was a very common mindset non-designers had back in the day. Today that is changing. Today people realize that if you want to launch an app, a product, a service, a startup, good design is minimum. It's not even, I'm going to do it and impress. It's minimum. It's the minimum thing you need. Because think about this yourself. Would you ever use an app that is not well designed? Would you use an app that's buggy, that's glitchy, that doesn't give you a good experience? No, you would find something else. And the point is, there are so many products out there, right? Number of jobs is increasing. So don't ever fall into that zero-sum mentality. Colleges, you do feel that as well. In a batch, when you're in a college, people feel that competition because you're like, dude, we're going to have placements. And placements means competition. But the real world is not placements. The real world is not you competing for a set list to be number 2, to be number 1. The real world, you can go make your own game. If you feel like you're number 7,000 on the list, right? I felt like I was number 7,000 on the list, right? In school, I was like, bro, there's no way I can compete with these toppers. I went and found a different game, right? For me, that was building products, eventually computer science, eventually design and side hustles and all of that. Maybe we'll get into that. For you, if you feel like you've been forced to compete, understand that there's a different option out there. You don't have to do that. You can go make your own game. You can go join other games out there. It's not a cutthroat environment. If you enjoyed that video, please, of course, let us know. Leave a like and comment. But besides that, this is what we do for a living. We help creatives and designers level up in their careers. If you'd like to join one of our live programs, we do them a few times a year. Check out the link in the description. It's 10kdesigners.com. And I'll see you around.